The scratch was already there. A thin, silver line cutting across midnight blue paint, when Claudia's trembling fingers finally dropped the keys. She didn't hear them hit the ground. All she could hear was her own ragged breathing, the hammering of her heart, and the impossible silence of the man standing 3 feet away, watching her with eyes so dark they seemed to swallow light. Van didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the damage to his Bugatti La Voiture Noire with an expression she couldn't read, and that terrified her more than anger ever could. Before we dive deeper into this moment that changed everything, I want to ask you something from the heart. If you love stories that make you feel, that remind you what it's like to have butterflies, to hope, to believe in the kind of connection that defies logic, please hit that subscribe button. I'm building something special here, a community of people who aren't afraid to feel deeply, and your support means the world. A like, a share, even a comment about what you're hoping happens next. It all helps more than you know. Now, let's get back to Claudia, standing in front of a $15 million car she just scratched, and the man who should hate her but won't take his eyes off her face. 3 minutes earlier, Claudia had been running. Not jogging, not hurrying, but running the way you run when your world is collapsing and you can't be inside your own skin for one more second. She'd left her apartment with nothing but her phone and keys, mascara-streaked and desperate, her best friend Maya's words still echoing in her skull. He's been cheating on you for 6 months, Claudia. 6 months. I saw the messages myself. He's been taking her to your favorite restaurants. The parking garage had been a blur through her tears. She hadn't seen the blue car until her shoulder clipped the side mirror, sending her stumbling sideways. Her keys had flown from her hand, metal scraping across perfect paint as gravity pulled them down. And now this stranger in a black suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve rather than a problem he needed to eliminate. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked, words tumbling out in a panicked rush. I wasn't looking, I didn't mean to. I'll pay for it. I swear I'll figure out how to pay for it. I can set up a payment plan or... You're bleeding. Claudia blinked, following his gaze to her elbow where blood was seeping through her torn sleeve. She hadn't even felt it. That's not important right now. Your car is a car. Van's voice was measured, controlled, but something flickered in his expression. You're hurt. I'll be fine. But your car, it's a Bugatti, isn't it? I don't even know how much something like this costs to fix, but I'll figure it out. I promise. Stop. He moved closer, each step deliberate, and she noticed details she'd missed in her panic. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. The intensity in his eyes that made her feel exposed and seen all at once. Breathe. I can't afford to breathe right now. I just destroyed your car. You scratched it. There's a difference. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something dark and cedar-tinged that made her head spin. And you still haven't answered my question. What question? Why are you crying? Claudia laughed, a broken sound that hurt coming out. That's really not relevant to the situation. It's the only thing that's relevant. Van tilted his head slightly, studying her with unnerving focus. You're running through a parking garage at 9 p.m., crying hard enough that you can't see where you're going. Something happened. Something bad enough that you don't even care that your arm is bleeding. You don't know me well enough to psychoanalyze me. No, he agreed quietly. But I'd like to. The words hung between them, impossible and absurd. Claudia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I just scratched your $15 million car. Closer to 18, actually. But who's counting? A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. And you're changing the subject. Because the subject should be how I'm going to pay for this damage. Van crouched down smoothly, picking up her keys. Instead of handing them back, he turned them over in his hands, his thumb brushing the worn ceramic owl keychain. This is hand-painted. My best friend made it. Claudia's throat closed up. She's the one who told me my boyfriend has been cheating on me for half a year. She found the messages, the photos, everything. Something dangerous flashed across Van's face. Where is he now? I don't know. I don't care. I just needed to get out, to breathe, to not feel like the walls were closing in. She gestured helplessly at the scratch, at the absurdity of the entire situation. And instead I crashed into you and ruined your car and probably my entire life in the process. You didn't ruin anything. Van stood, stepping closer until there was barely a foot between them. And he's an idiot. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made awareness prickle across her skin. Because you're standing here apologizing for an accident while your world is falling apart. You're worried about a stranger's car instead of your own pain. That tells me exactly what kind of person you are. And anyone who would betray that kind of goodness is worse than an idiot. He's a fool. Claudia's breath caught. She should step back, create distance. Remember that this man was a stranger whose property she damaged. But she couldn't seem to move. I still have to pay for the repairs. Then have dinner with me. What? Dinner? Van's gaze never wavered from hers. Tomorrow night. Let me take you somewhere you can forget about people who don't deserve you. That's insane. Probably, he agreed. A hint of something vulnerable breaking through his controlled exterior. I don't do things like this. I don't believe in instant connections or fate or love at first sight. I've built my entire life on logic and control and careful planning. He paused, something raw entering his expression. And then you came around that corner looking like your heart was breaking, and I haven't been able to think straight since. I don't even know your name, and I already know I need to see you again. Claudia, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Claudia, he said it slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of it. I'm Van, and I'm not asking you to trust me or to believe this makes sense. I'm just asking you to have dinner with me. One dinner. If you hate every second of it, I'll never bother you again. But if you don't, he trailed off, holding out her keys. She should say no. Should tell this beautiful, intense stranger that she couldn't have dinner with him, that she didn't even know him, that this entire situation was ridiculous. Instead, she reached for her keys, and when his fingers brushed against hers, electricity shot up her arm. Why? Because some things you just know, Van said quietly, his hand still touching hers. And I know that walking away from you would be the biggest mistake I ever made. The vulnerability in his voice, the honesty in his eyes, undid something in her chest. Claudia looked down at where their hands connected and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. Okay. The smile that transformed Van's face made her stomach flip. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up. You don't know where I live. He pulled out his phone with his free hand. Then I guess you'll have to give me your number. Claudia laughed despite everything, surprising herself with the sound. It felt foreign, like remembering how to use muscles she'd forgotten existed. She rattled off her digits, watching him save the contact with her name and a small blue heart emoji that made butterflies erupt in her stomach. Go home, Claudia, Van said gently, finally releasing her hand. The loss of contact felt significant. Take care of that arm. Call your friend. Tomorrow will be better than today. You can't promise that. His eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Watch me. She walked away on unsteady legs, glancing back once to find him still standing there beside his damaged car, watching her with an expression that made her feel like she was the most important thing in his world. The scratch caught the light, a thin silver scar, and Claudia thought maybe sometimes the worst moments cracked you open for something unexpected to get in. That night, lying in bed with Maya on speakerphone, Claudia recounted the entire surreal encounter. Let me get this absolutely straight, Maya said slowly, disbelief dripping from every word. You scratched a millionaire's Bugatti, and instead of calling the police or his lawyer or demanding payment, he asked you out on a date? That's the summary, yes. Claudia, that's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or the setup for a true crime podcast. There is no in-between. I'm very aware of both possibilities. What's his last name? I need to Google him immediately. Make sure he's not a serial killer or married or... I didn't get his last name. Maya's silence was deafening. You're going to dinner with a strange man whose last name you don't know. When you say it like that, it sounds terrible. That's because it is terrible. Claudia, I love you, but your judgment is clearly impaired right now. You just found out Marcus has been cheating on you for 6 months. You're vulnerable and hurt and maybe that's exactly why I should do this, Claudia interrupted quietly. Marcus made me feel small and insignificant. This man, this Van, he looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth paying attention to. Maybe I need to remember what that feels like. Maya sighed, her voice softening. Just text me the address of the restaurant and his license plate number, and keep your location services on. You're paranoid. I'm careful. There's a difference. A pause. What are you going to wear? Claudia smiled into the darkness. I have no idea. That's my girl. I'm coming over tomorrow afternoon. We're going shopping. Maya. Yeah. Thank you for telling me about Marcus. I know it wasn't easy. You deserved to know the truth. Maya's voice cracked slightly. And you deserve so much better than him. Maybe this Van guy is it. Maybe he's a disaster. But at least you're moving forward instead of staying stuck in Marcus's lies. After they hung up, Claudia stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment. The way Van had looked at her, the gentleness in his voice, the vulnerability when he'd admitted he didn't understand what was happening to him either. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you're probably not asleep. I'm not either. I keep thinking about the fact that I didn't ask if you were okay. Are you okay? Claudia's heart stuttered. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on honesty. No, but I think I might be tomorrow. His response came immediately. Then I'll do everything I can to make sure you are. Sleep well, Claudia. She fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand and a smile on her face. The next afternoon, Maya descended on her apartment like a fashionable hurricane, armed with shopping bags and opinions. We're going for elegant but not trying too hard, Maya announced, pulling out a deep emerald dress. This brings out your eyes and says, I'm beautiful and interesting and you're lucky I'm here. That's a lot of communication from one dress. Fashion is a language, babe. Learn to speak it. Maya thrust the dress at her. Try it on. And tell me everything you know about this guy. As Claudia changed, she recounted what little she knew. Van worked in real estate development. He drove expensive cars. He didn't believe in instant connections until he met her. That's almost nothing, Maya said flatly. I know. And you're still going. I am. Maya studied her for a long moment. You really like him. I don't even know him. That's not what I asked. Claudia looked at her reflection in the emerald dress, barely recognizing the woman staring back. He made me feel seen, Maya, like really seen. Not just looked at, but seen. When was the last time Marcus made me feel that way? Never, Maya said quietly. He never saw you, Claudia. He just saw what you could do for him. That's why this is so scary. Because maybe this Van guy actually does see you, and that's terrifying when you've spent 2 years with someone who didn't. At exactly 7 o'clock, Claudia's buzzer rang. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her bag. Text me every hour, Maya commanded, pulling her into a fierce hug. And if anything feels wrong, call me. I'll come get you, no questions asked. I will. I promise. Van was waiting in the lobby, and when he saw her, he went completely still. He was wearing dark jeans and a charcoal gray Henley that made his eyes look almost black, and the expression on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman alive. Claudia. He crossed to her slowly, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're stunning. You're not so bad yourself. He smiled, offering his hand. When she took it, his fingers closed around hers with a gentleness that made her chest tight. I've been thinking about you all day. Just all day. All night too, if we're being honest. He led her to a sleek black Mercedes, opening the door for her. As they pulled into traffic, he glanced over, something uncertain in his expression. I should tell you something. Claudia's stomach dropped. Should I be worried? No. But I want to be completely honest with you. Van's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Last night, after I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about you. So I did something I'm not proud of. What? I had someone look you up. Nothing invasive, he added quickly. Just basic public information. Your name, where you work, making sure you were real and not going to disappear. He merged onto the highway, his jaw tight. I'm telling you because I don't want there to be secrets between us, even small ones. And because if that makes you uncomfortable, I need to know now. Claudia processed this, surprised to find she wasn't angry. What did you find out? That you're a social worker specializing in foster youth transition services. That you've been at the same agency for 4 years. That you volunteer on weekends at a literacy program. He glanced at her, vulnerable in a way that made him devastatingly human. That you're exactly who I thought you were. Someone who spends her life caring about people who have no one else in their corner. My best friend Googled you too, Claudia admitted. Or tried to. She couldn't find much except that you own a development company. Bardwell Development. We focus on sustainable urban housing projects. Van pulled up to a building Claudia recognized vaguely. An exclusive restaurant she'd walked past 100 times but never imagined entering. I started it 3 years ago after I got tired of working for my father's company and building things that only benefited the wealthy. Your father has a company? Had me working for him since I graduated college. Something bitter entered Van's voice. He builds luxury high-rises and commercial properties. Profitable but soulless. We had a difference of opinion about what success should look like. A valet opened Claudia's door, and Van was there immediately, offering his hand again. The restaurant was everything she'd imagined and more. All soft lighting and expensive art and waiters who moved like dancers. Van, I can't afford. You're not paying, he said firmly, his hand warm on the small of her back as he guided her inside. This is my apology. For what? For whatever happened in your life that made you forget you deserve to be treated like you're precious. Claudia's eyes stung. You don't even know me. Then let me, he said simply, and the honesty in his voice made her believe it was possible. They were seated at a private table overlooking the city, and as Van ordered wine that probably cost more than her monthly salary, Claudia felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Tell me about your work, Van said, leaning forward with genuine interest. What made you choose foster care? Claudia took a sip of wine that tasted like velvet and starlight, gathering her thoughts. My mom was in the system. She aged out at 18 with nothing and no one. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college. Met my dad, built a life from scratch. Her throat tightened. She always said that everyone deserves someone in their corner, someone who believes in them even when they can't believe in themselves. When she got sick, when I watched her fight cancer for 2 years and still lose, I needed to do something that mattered. Something that would make her proud. Van reached across the table, his fingers covering hers. She would be proud. What you do, helping kids who have no one, that's not just a job. That's a calling. What about you? Claudia asked, needing to shift focus before she started crying. Why sustainable housing? Why not just take over your father's empire? Something dark flickered across Van's face. Because my father's empire is built on making rich people richer. He doesn't care who gets displaced or priced out as long as the profit margins look good. His thumb brushed across her knuckles absently. I watched him demolish a community center to build luxury condos. There were after-school programs there, a food bank, services people depended on. He didn't care. When I objected, he told me sentiment doesn't pay the bills. So you left. So I left, Van confirmed. Started my own company with money I'd saved and investors who actually cared about making a difference. It's been an uphill battle, but we're building something that matters. Affordable housing that doesn't look like warehouses. Communities where families can actually thrive. That's incredible. It's necessary, Van corrected, his gaze intense on hers. And it's nothing compared to what you do. I build structures. You rebuild lives. The conversation flowed effortlessly after that, touching on everything and nothing. Van told her about growing up with a father who measured love in profit margins and a mother who'd left when he was 12 because she couldn't handle being treated like another acquisition. Claudia told him about foster kids who'd stolen pieces of her heart, about the exhaustion of caring so much it hurt, about her fear that she'd never be enough to make a real difference. "You are enough," Van said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "The fact that you care, that you keep showing up even when it's hard, that's everything. Those kids are lucky to have you." When dessert arrived, Claudia realized 3 hours had passed and it felt like minutes. "I should get you home," Van said reluctantly, signaling for the check. "Even though I don't want this to end." "Neither do I," Claudia admitted, and watched something bright and hopeful bloom in his expression. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, comfortable, charged with possibility. When Van walked her to her door, the hallway light made shadows dance across his face. "I want to see you again," Van said, his voice low and rough. "Tomorrow, the day after, as often as you'll let me." Claudia's heart hammered. "That's fast." "I know." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "And if it's too much, tell me. I'll slow down. But I need you to know that I've never felt like this, and I don't want to waste time pretending I'm not already falling for you." The raw honesty in his voice stole her breath. "Van, I know it's insane," he continued, his hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "I know we just met, but some things you just know, Claudia. And I know that you're going to change my life." She should be cautious, should tell him this was too much, too fast, too intense. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. Van froze for half a heartbeat before his arms came around her, pulling her close as he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her knees weak. He tasted like wine and promise and possibilities she'd stopped believing in, and when he finally pulled back, his forehead resting against hers, they were both breathing hard. "Tomorrow," Claudia whispered. "Tomorrow," Van agreed, pressing one more soft kiss to her lips before stepping back. "Sleep well." She watched him walk away, touching her fingers to her lips, and thought that maybe the universe broke your heart, sometimes just to make room for something better. The next 3 weeks were intoxicating. Van called every morning before she left for work, his voice rough with sleep, asking about her day before it even started. They had dinner 4 more times, then coffee dates, then a spontaneous midnight trip to a diner where they talked until sunrise painted the sky pink. He met Maya, who pulled Claudia aside in the bathroom and whispered fiercely, "If you don't keep him, I will personally question every decision you've ever made." Van told her about the housing project he was fighting for 100 units of affordable housing that would provide stable homes for families currently stuck in temporary situations. His eyes lit up when he talked about it, and Claudia fell a little more in love with his passion. He met some of her kids, showing up at the community center where she ran a weekly homework help program. Claudia watched him talk to a 16-year-old named Marcus about architecture and saw the exact moment the kid's eyes lit up with possibility. "You're good with them," she said later as they walked to his car. "They remind me of me," Van admitted. "Not the foster care part, but the feeling of being invisible, of not matching to the people who are supposed to care about you most." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "You make them visible, Claudia. You make them matter. That's everything." For weeks after the parking garage, Van took her to see the site of his housing project. It was just foundation work and framing, but he walked her through it like it was already a palace, describing where the community center would go, where the playground would be, pointing out the green spaces and community gardens. "This is incredible," Claudia breathed, imagining it complete. "This is necessary," Van corrected, echoing his earlier words. "And it almost didn't happen." "What do you mean?" Van's expression darkened. "My father tried to block the permits, called in favors, pressured the city council, did everything he could to make sure this project died before it started." "Why would he do that?" "Because I built something without him. Because I succeeded on my own terms instead of his." Van's jaw tightened. "He can't stand that I walked away and didn't fail, so he tries to make me fail." Claudia slipped her hand into his. "But you didn't. You built this. We built this, Van corrected, looking down at her. Every time I wanted to give up, every time my father made things harder, I thought about you. About the way you keep showing up for kids who have every reason to give up hope. If you can do that, I can do this. That night, sitting on her couch with Van's arms around her, some movie playing forgotten on the TV, Claudia felt something shift into place. I love you, she said quietly, feeling him go still beneath her. Van turned her in his arms, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers. Say that again. I love you. Her voice was stronger now, certain. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I love you, Van. You make me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, his voice was rough with emotion. I love you too. God, Claudia. I've loved you since you crashed into my life and turned everything upside down. I've just been terrified to say it. Why? Because loving you means I have something to lose. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. And I've never had anything I was this afraid of losing. They fell asleep tangled together that night, and Claudia thought she'd never felt safer or more certain of anything. But certainty, she learned 3 days later, was sometimes an illusion. Van's father called an emergency board meeting. Van had been tense all morning, checking his phone obsessively, his usual warmth replaced by something cold and distant. When Claudia asked what was wrong, he just pulled her close and said, "Nothing I can't handle." She didn't hear from him for 8 hours. When he finally showed up at her apartment at 10 p.m., he looked destroyed. What happened? Claudia pulled him inside, her hands on his face, searching his expression for answers. My father found out about us, Van said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. He had you investigated. Background check, financial records, everything. Ice flooded Claudia's veins. Why? To find leverage. Van's hands curled into fists at his sides. He knows about your mom, about your job, about Marcus. He knows everything, and he's going to use it. Use it how? Van's laugh was bitter, broken. He called me into his office this afternoon, told me I need to end things with you. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Why? Because you're not suitable. The word dripped with venom. You don't come from money. You work a menial job helping people who don't contribute to society. You have no connections that could benefit the company or my career. In his exact words, you're a distraction I can't afford and a liability I need to eliminate. Claudia stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. And what did you say? Van looked at her like she'd stabbed him. What do you think I said? I told him to go to hell. Van. I told him that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. That I love you and I don't give a damn what he thinks about it. His voice rose, frustration and fury bleeding through. I told him he could take his approval and his money and his empire and shove it all because I'm not giving you up. Relief started to bloom in Claudia's chest, but Van's expression stopped it cold. But he didn't just want me to end it, Van continued, something desperate entering his voice. He gave me an ultimatum. What kind of ultimatum? Van's hands shook as he ran them through his hair. End it with you or he pulls the funding for the housing project. 3 years of work, for 100 families who need those homes. Everything I've built. All of it gone if I don't walk away from you. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. What? He's the primary investor. I didn't know until today. Van's voice cracked. I thought I'd built this independently, but he's been secretly funding it through shell companies. He set me up, Claudia. He set this whole thing up so he could take it away the second I did something he didn't like. How many families? Claudia's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Don't. Van crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. Don't do that. Don't make this about them. How many, Van? 400. He looked away, anguish written across his face. 400 families, half of them with kids, all of them depending on this project to give them stable housing. If it dies, they go back to temporary shelters, overcrowded apartments, impossible rent payments. Claudia felt something inside her chest crack wide open. Then you know what you have to do. No, Van's fingers tightened on her shoulders, almost painful. No, I'm not giving you up. I don't care what he threatens. I'll find other investors. I'll mortgage everything I own. I'll figure it out. In time. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. Can you get new funding in time to save the project? Before families are displaced. Before permits expire. Van's silence was answer enough. I can't let you do this, Claudia whispered, her heart shattering with every word. I can't let 400 families lose their homes because of me. Because your father wants to prove he still controls you. This isn't your choice. Yes, it is. She pulled away from him, even though it felt like tearing off her own skin. I'm making it my choice. Those families need you. Those kids need stable homes. And I won't be the reason you can't give that to them. Claudia, I love you, she said, tears streaming down her face. I love you so much it terrifies me. But I love you enough to let you go if it means you can be who you're meant to be. If it means those families get the home they deserve. Van's face crumpled, devastation replacing fury. Don't do this. Please. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Claudia's voice broke completely. And you know it. Your father made sure of that. They stood there, inches apart and miles away, the weight of impossible choices crushing them both. Van pulled her into his arms suddenly, desperately, holding on like he was drowning. I will never forgive him for this, he said into her hair, his voice raw. And I will never stop loving you. I know. Claudia sobbed into his chest, memorizing the feel of him, the smell of him, the way his heart raced against hers. I know. He kissed her one last time, soft and desperate and final, pouring everything they'd never get to say into it. When he finally pulled away, there were tears on his face too. I'm sorry, Van whispered. Don't be sorry. Just promise me you'll build something beautiful. Promise me those families will get the home you envisioned for them. I promise. His hand came up to cup her face one last time. And I promise that if there's ever a way, if I can ever figure out how to fix this, I'm coming back for you. Don't, Claudia said, even though her heart was screaming the opposite. Don't put your life on hold for something that might never happen. Build your project. Help those families. Be the person I fell in love with. Van pressed his forehead to hers, both of them breathing through the pain. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm really not. I'm just someone who loves you enough to let you go. When the door closed behind him, Claudia collapsed on her couch and cried until there was nothing left. Maya came over 20 minutes later, letting herself in with her emergency key, and crawled into bed beside Claudia without saying a word. She just held her while Claudia shook apart, and that somehow made it bearable. I'm so sorry, babe, Maya whispered finally. I did the right thing, Claudia said into the darkness, trying to convince herself. I know you did. That doesn't make it hurt any less. The next 2 weeks were agony. Claudia threw herself into work, spending extra hours at the community center, taking on additional cases, trying to outrun the ache in her chest that never quite faded. She deleted Van's number but couldn't bring herself to delete their texts, reading them late at night when she couldn't sleep, torturing herself with memories. Van didn't contact her. She told herself that was good, that clean breaks healed faster, even as she checked her phone obsessively every time it buzzed. She saw Marcus once, accidentally, coming out of a coffee shop near her office. He tried to approach her, to explain, but she just walked past him like he didn't exist. Whatever power he'd had over her had burned away the night she met Van. And now he was just a stranger who'd wasted 2 years of her life. Maya staged an intervention on a Friday night, showing up with Thai food and wine. You need to eat something other than coffee and sadness, Maya announced, unpacking containers on Claudia's coffee table. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're in love with someone you can't have, and it's destroying you. It was the right thing to do, Claudia repeated, the words hollow now. The right thing still sucks sometimes. Maya handed her a plate. Have you heard from him at all? Claudia shook her head, not trusting her voice. Maybe that's good. Maybe clean break is better. That's what I keep telling myself. They ate in silence for a while before Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. What? Claudia asked. Check the local news. Right now. Claudia pulled up the news site on her phone, and her heart stopped. The headline read, Bardwell Development moves forward with affordable housing project after securing independent funding. Her hands were shaking as she clicked the article. There was a photo of Van at a press conference, looking exhausted but determined. The article detailed how he'd secured funding from a coalition of nonprofit investors and progressive venture capital firms, cutting all ties with his father's company. Sources say the move came after a dispute between Van Bardwell and his father, prominent developer Jonathan Bardwell, over the direction and funding of the project. Claudia read aloud, her voice trembling. Van Bardwell stated that the housing development will move forward as planned, providing 400 units of affordable housing to families in need. Maya squeezed her hand. He did it. He found another way. Claudia's phone rang before she could respond. Unknown number. Her heart hammered as she answered. Hello, Claudia. A woman's voice, professional and warm. My name is Sarah Chun. I'm the director of the Riverside Community Foundation. Van Bardwell gave me your number. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Yes. Excellent. Van mentioned you're a social worker specializing in foster youth transition services. We're looking to partner with the new housing development to provide comprehensive support services for families, including specialized programs for teens aging out of foster care. Van suggested you might be interested in heading up that initiative. Claudia's hand flew to her mouth. I don't understand. It would be a full-time position, competitive salary, full autonomy over program development. Van was very clear that he wanted you to have complete creative control. He said you're the only person who could build something meaningful. Sarah paused. He also said to tell you that the job offer stands whether you ever speak to him again or not. He just wants you to have the opportunity. Tears poured down Claudia's face. Can I think about it? Of course. Take a week. But Claudia, Van didn't just suggest you for this role. He made it a condition of accepting the new funding. He told the investors that this project needed wraparound services to be successful, and you were the only person he trusted to build them. That's how much he believes in you. After she hung up, Claudia stared at her phone in disbelief. What was that? Maya demanded. Claudia explained through tears, watching Maya's expression shift from confusion to understanding to fierce joy. He found a way, Maya breathed. He actually found a way. But he didn't call me himself, Claudia said quietly. He's giving me the choice. The job offer stands whether I speak to him again or not. So what are you going to do? Claudia thought about Van's father, about the cruelty of using 400 families as leverage. She thought about Van's promise that if there was ever a way, he'd come back for her. He'd found a way, but he was leaving the next move up to her. I'm going to accept the job, Claudia said slowly, and then I'm going to show up at his office and tell him that he's an idiot. Why is he an idiot? Because he thinks I'd take this job and not want him to. Maya's smile was brilliant. That's my girl. On Monday morning, Claudia walked into Bardwell Development's office wearing her best dress and carrying 2 cups of coffee. The receptionist looked startled. I'm here to see Van, Claudia said, her heart hammering. I don't have an appointment. He's in a meeting. Tell him Claudia's here. He'll see me. The receptionist made a call, her eyes widening at whatever response she got. He said to send you right in. 4th floor, corner office. Claudia's hands shook as she rode the elevator up. The doors opened to reveal a bright, modern office space with huge windows overlooking the city. Van's office door was open, and he was standing by the window, his back to her. Van. He turned slowly, and the expression on his face when he saw her made her knees weak. Hope and fear and love all tangled together. Claudia. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept in days. Sarah called. She said you're considering the position. I'm accepting it, Claudia corrected, setting down the coffee cups and crossing to him. But I have some conditions. Van's throat worked as he swallowed. Anything. First, you're an idiot. He blinked. What? You're an idiot if you think I'm going to take this job and not want you to. If you think I'm going to build something meaningful and not want you beside me while I do it. She stopped right in front of him, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the stubble on his jaw. I let you go because I thought those families needed you more than I did. But you found another way, Van. You cut ties with your father. You found new funding. You built something independent. It took 2 weeks, Van said quietly. 2 weeks of 18-hour days and calling in every favor I'd ever earned. 2 weeks of negotiating and restructuring and proving I could make this work without him. Why didn't you call me? Because I needed to know I could do it first. His hand came up to cup her face, trembling slightly. I needed to know I wasn't asking you to sacrifice anything. That I'd built something real that didn't depend on him or his money or his approval. Something we could build on together. We. Claudia's voice broke on the word. If you'll have me. Van's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know I hurt you. I know I let you go when I should have fought harder to find another way. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I love you, Claudia. I'm so in love with you it terrifies me. And if you'll give me another chance, I promise I'll spend every day proving that you're my first priority. Not the business, not the project, not anything but you. Claudia kissed him, pouring 2 weeks of pain and longing and hope into it. Van's arms came around her immediately, holding her like she was precious, like she was everything. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I never stopped. I'm sorry I let you go. I'm sorry I made you choose. You didn't make me choose. My father did. Van pulled back just enough to look at her, something fierce in his expression. And I chose you, Claudia. I chose us. I just needed time to make sure I could give you the life you deserve. I don't need fancy dinners or expensive things, Claudia said, her hands framing his face. I just need you. The real you who cares about families who need homes and kids who need hope. That's who I fell in love with. Then you'll take the job? On one condition. Name it. We do this together. We build this program, this project, this life as partners. No more sacrificing yourself for others. No more carrying everything alone. Her thumb brushed across his cheekbone. You're not alone anymore, Van. You have me. His kiss was his answer, deep and sure and full of promise. Later, sitting in his office with their coffee finally getting cold, Van pulled out his phone and showed her something. It was the scratched panel from his Bugatti, now mounted on the wall behind his desk. Why do you have that? Claudia asked, bemused. Because it's where my real life started, Van said simply. The moment you crashed into me, everything changed. I stopped being the person my father wanted me to be and started becoming who I was meant to be. That scratch is a reminder that the best things in life come from the moments we don't plan. From the accidents that crack us open for something better. Claudia leaned into his side, looking at the thin silver scar across midnight blue paint. I can't believe you kept it. I'll always keep it. Just like I'll always keep you, if you'll let me. Always is a long time. Then it's a good thing I'm patient. Van pressed a kiss to her temple. Besides, we have 400 families to help settle into their new homes. A comprehensive youth program to build from the ground up. A lot of long nights and hard work ahead of us. Sounds perfect. And it was. Not easy, not simple, but perfect in the way that real things are perfect. Messy and complicated and worth fighting for. 6 months later, Claudia stood in the completed community center at the heart of the housing development, watching Van give a tour to a group of new residents. A little girl tugged on his sleeve, asking about the playground, and Van crouched down to her level, answering seriously like her question was the most important thing in the world. Maya appeared at Claudia's shoulder, following her gaze. You two are disgustingly perfect together. You know that? I'm aware, Claudia said, unable to stop smiling. He still looks at you like you hung the moon. The feeling's mutual. Van caught her eye across the room and smiled, that private smile that was just for her, and Claudia thought about fate and chance and parking garages. about scratches on expensive cars and the kind of love that survives impossible choices. Sometimes the worst moments cracked you open for the best things to get in. Sometimes destruction was just creation in disguise. And sometimes, when you were brave enough to let yourself fall, someone was there to catch you. Van crossed to her as the tour ended, slipping his hand into hers like it belonged there. Ready to go home? With you? Always. They walked out together into the evening light, past the playground where children were laughing, past the community gardens where families were planting hope, past the homes they'd built together through love and determination and refusing to let anyone else define what was possible. The scratch on Van's car had been worth millions. But what they'd built together, that was priceless. Before you go, thank you for being here, for believing in stories where love survives impossible odds and good people refuse to give up on each other. If this moved you, if it reminded you that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes, leave me a comment. Tell me your favorite moment. Tell me if you've ever had to choose between love and responsibility, or if you believe that sometimes you can have both if you're willing to fight for it. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that beautiful things can rise from broken moments. And subscribe, because there are so many more stories to tell, so many more reasons to believe in love that transforms and endures and refuses to quit. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for feeling deeply with me. Until next time, keep believing in love that's worth the fight.